Everyone, welcome to Simulation. We have a very, very special guest with us today. We have Bernhard Guenther. Hello.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me to San Francisco.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
All right, Bernhard, thanks for coming.
Bernhard, man, where do we start? Ron Vargas first introduced me to your work. Ron's been, how long have you been with Ron's work now? Or with Bernhard's work?
9 years. I was looking for the information that he speaks about and produced a film about, and I found Piercing the Veil of Reality, and I just discovered it to be the most comprehensive film on the "Are we alone?" question.
That we so famously ask on our show.
Yeah. And I've been following him on Facebook ever since, and it's the things that he talks about. It's just a long process to, comprehend and then to practice. So it's great to have him on the show to talk more about it and share with our audience.
So 9 years for Ron, and then he introduced me to you a couple months ago, and I fell in love with the work as well. Very deep work. Piercing the Veil of Reality has been 12 years now in the making. That's a really long amount of time to be focusing on a lot of esoteric subjects, a lot of culture, a lot of matrix theory, a lot of spirituality and transcendence, all these different subject areas that you kind of tap into, human psychology. So this is going to be fun. Bernhard, give us the scoop on your life. So you were born in LA, then went to Germany for most of your life, and then came back.
Yeah. Well, actually, a lot of people don't know that I was actually born in Los Angeles. Both my parents are German. They lived in Los Angeles, late 60s, early 70s. My dad made his PhD at UCLA, and then I was born, and my mom wanted to get the hell out of there. Didn't want me to grow up in Los Angeles. God bless her. And they moved back with me when I was 1 year old. And then, grew up in Munich, Germany, really just going through the program, always felt, was the loner, so to speak, never really fitting in. And then I found music, drums and percussion, actually already when I was in the University of Munich studying business, because I thought that's what I need to do to become happy, to make money and all of that. And through synchronicities, grace, I met my friend back then, and I started playing drums and had this transcendental experience. It was just like, this is what I need to do, what I want to do for my life. Quit university, saved up money, and moved to Los Angeles at the age of 22 to go to music school, study drums, and just stayed there.
And drums are beautiful.
Oh yeah, it's especially because I like dancing. It's like the perfect combination between making music and physically expressing yourself. So that was and I was really focused and almost obsessed with drums, playing 4 to 6 hours a day and nothing else, and just looking back, it was actually my spiritual practice, especially in terms of shadow work, because I was really into pretty dark, heavy music. But it's fun to play it on the drums, right? And that initiated deeper processes, and I'm battling with my own emotional sensitivity and depression. So I naturally started to ask questions. And a lot of people ask me how I got into the work, and I can summarize it in one word: is suffering, right? I needed to understand myself, figure myself out, still couldn't fit in what's going on in this planet, starting to question it. And then when you ask the question, doors open and synchronicities, teachers, mentors, teachings, books come across, tumble down the rabbit hole. Then I found another gift, body work and massage, healing work, right? Went through that initiation, found yoga, qigong. That's what I started out more with, the inner work, actually. Spiritual inner work, psychology, Jungian psychology, and then I dove deep into the rabbit hole, basic conspiracy, and then more into the fringe, the UFO topic, right? Aliens also infused.
How did you go from all that right into UFOs and aliens?
Because of my own experience, especially psychedelics. Back in the days, I was really, when I get into something, I get into something. So I went and explored psychedelics quite intensely back in the days that, I was part of the rave scene. Like, we had these illegal raves once a month, out in the desert somewhere. And that's where was my introduction to basically this particular psilocybin mushrooms and DMT already back in the late 90s, early 2000. And when you asked me this question, one big part was always felt that we're not alone. Even I remember as a child, like being out in the fields in Germany, looking in the sky, and like almost like take me back home kind of thing, but not consciously realizing it. So I always felt there's something else. And when I had my more intense psychedelic experience, especially high doses of mushrooms, a lot of people talk about spiritual experiences, but for me it was more like an alien experience. As kind of was confronted with these entities and beings, this other intelligence, and it felt so alien yet familiar to me in a weird way. Right, so that kind of was the trigger. And then books or certain material I came across and kind of dug myself through it, so to speak. And
do you feel you're being channeled?
I'm being channeled?
Yeah, something is coming through you, something is trying to communicate all the information that you talk about and write about. Do you feel it's not necessarily from you, but through you, that it's a benevolent entity, even though you have dealt with
tricky
dark
territory.
Forces? Yes, exactly. But I feel sometimes something is channeling me, coming through me, and it's not from me. I sometimes say, "Wow, where did this thought come from?" So, do you feel that you experience the same way?
I definitely feel this more and more in terms of like I call it even downloads, but even my writing. Like for me, we talked about it briefly before, the writing process, right? It's very mysterious to me. Like even I would be a horrible staff writer. I cannot write on command, right? Whatever, I don't write many essays or blogs, maybe 2 or 3 a year. But it's like, it's just coming down and just reflects also my own life, and I get this information and I don't try to overthink it, and then I do my research and kind of like it confirms it in many ways, and I try to structure it and put it into the limitations of words and language, but I feel like it's no different like any true artist in the sense I feel a true artist also gets the inspiration from somewhere else. It's not him or her doing it. Right, I think we all tap into that in varying degrees. Right, so it's not, we all kind of channel it on some level, and then the tricky part is like, what do we align ourselves with? Because in the end, I realize I feel we're always just transducers of higher energies. It's not really us, me doing, and who is the I? That's a whole philosophical question itself, right? Mm-hmm. But when you think about the I, for the most part, it's just the accumulation of memory and experiences, but who is this I? And then it's paradoxical, and one part of me wants this, the other that.
What is the I without time?
So I feel there's this, like what I also call, when I look back into my life, I felt, you can only kind of connect the dots looking back, and then I feel there's always this force, benevolent, divine force in the sense that pulled or pushed me in a certain path, what I'm here to do from a higher perspective, right? And it's not up to me, I have neither control of it. And as I said many times, I can summarize my life by the saying, tell God your plans, he will laugh at you, because anything I planned never really happened that I thought I wanted, or the things I thought I wanted back in my 20s or 30s didn't manifest. And I'm glad they didn't manifest, because I realized that it was not coming from my true self anyway, but from my own conditioning, wounds. A lot of people, when we grow up in culture and conditioning and programming, have desires and wants and needs, they're not even their own, but programmed into them, right? And there's a soul calling for something else, and you can call it soul purpose or whatnot, right? So it's about this alignment, getting yourself out of the way, which is easier said than done, but that's the whole part of, I feel, of esoteric work, right? To become a conscious transducer of higher energies, the divine, or whatever you may want to call it.
Let's stay on this for a little bit. So we have something channeling through us our actualization, what our value that we're supposed to bring to the world. We have to get the ego out of the way of that. Mm-hmm. Tell us more.
Well, the ego, like the conditioned ego personality, which we mostly identify with, right? Which is not our true self. And
what is the true self?
That's, that's, I would say, like, okay, words, language, right? Yeah. Our divine nature, like soul, and what is that? Can you prove it, right? The atheist materialist will have a hard problem with that.
So the divine nature, the soul, that's the true self, and then the ego is not the true self.
It's like, I have sometimes problem when people destroy your ego, the ego is bad. It's not like that. It's more like fine-tuning or deconditioning yourself, which is an intense process through the disillusionment, and all this stuff comes up we need to heal, and bring the soul, the psychic being, as Sri Aurobindo said, to the front. Like any esoteric teaching talks about the necessity to, like Gurdjieff talks about, to grow the soul, that we don't have actually true access to it.
The benevolent understanding.
Right, and then the ego person becomes a pure expression of that, because we all have and need ego to exist in this 3D reality.
So the ego becomes an expression of the
essence,
soul.
of essence, let's say essence, right?
And but the more often it's important for that divine nature to shine, the soul to shine, than it is for the ego mask to come on and shine. So then you can move between the soul and then the ego as needed.
Well, it's both, then it becomes an interface, right? It's like it's not separated anymore.
It's an interface together.
I would, that's the way I would describe it.
And then you kind of upregulate one of the energies as needed in yourself, rather than living in only the ego, or rather than in living in only the divine soul.
Well, the divine is almost like what I feel is almost the escape, when you just escape into some cave in the Himalayas and just be in samadhi or nirvana, or you know what I mean? That's, you know, on some level I find it actually spiritual bypassing the extreme to escape the world.
Yes.
Rather than anchoring the divine force, and we're here for a reason, and do our work and contribute and engage and not escape from life. Right?
Let's stay there again. Contribution. So a lot of our meaning or our actualization comes from contribution. Providing the world with some value that we can then reflect back on and see the tribe has said, thank you for this value that you have brought to us.
In terms of service. Right? So to speak, and then we all have our unique soul potential, like soul talent, soul, whatever purpose you want to call it, like including soul lessons. So the more you tune deeper into that, then you truly also connect to your vocation, what you're here to do, contribute from a higher level. And it's so very unique to you, and only you can do, and you're the best at it. So it really then cancels out any form of competition, right? Or ambition, or any of that, because it's your unique contribution, so to speak. It's nothing you learn at school or can get certified in.
Well, they don't teach you that at school.
Oh, that's the opposite.
You know, I'm sure we'll talk about the matrix further into the discussion.
Yeah, but that's a good point, because, you know, on the basic level in the educational system, the intellect is worshipped, right? The mind. It's about memorizing, grading, right? You don't learn nothing about emotional intelligence. You're not being told about the body-mind connection, how to tune into your intuition. It's almost like discouraged, like you're a dreamer, don't trust your feelings, right? So what happens more and more is the body-mind split, and it keeps us up in the head, and we mostly live out of the head then, right? And the mind, and I'm not demonizing the mind, it has its place.
Totally.
Right? Logic, rational, like it has its place.
Totally.
But if it's disconnected from being, disconnected from our higher nature, then the trouble kicks in, right? And then we can be manipulated by all kinds of forces as well, because we've lost the inner connection, right? It's actually the mind is great for doing things we do right now, to translate and communicate, right?
Yeah.
But it's the worst place to make decisions from. And that's, I've seen where a lot of people get myself into trouble when we make decisions from up here, rather than from our intuitive guidance, that deep in the gut, right in the body, this deep embodied that, you know, it's more than a feeling, it's a deeper knowing, right? But for that, we need to be embodied, get out of here, and start to trust ourselves.
Let's stay on embodiment now. That's because that's been a pillar of your practice and of your teachings. Okay, so I wonder. Let's go back in evolution a little bit and just where did this moment
Evolution?
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Where did? Okay, well maybe we should address that before we get to my question then. Why evolution?
What do you understand under evolution? Let's put it this way.
I'm talking about the last couple million years of evolution. The transition from the chimpanzee to the human.
Didn't we talk about this morning, though?
You just gave me the same air quote, but then we didn't go into detail furthermore. What is your...
So you're talking about the official evolution that we...
The official scientific evolution.
That we evolved from apes, chimpanzees,
Yes.
and all of that,
Correct.
including the missing link. Well, I don't know. Like, I don't agree with it.
Explain, yes.
Right. I mean, for me, it ties into many other things, right? Obviously, official culture, what we've been told and taught, history. You know, if you dive deeper and really ask questions, you tap into this whole matrix, you know, which is also, I talk about the matrix control system, and then everything what we've told and taught is actually is a very distortion of what happened in our lives, and a lot of stuff has been suppressed and left out. Even official history, I mean, is in many ways a lie agreed upon. Right,
What
so
about
to
all
speak.
the archaeology and all
And
the
there's a lot of
paleontology?
mysterious, but there's an excellent book, I forgot who wrote it, but called Hidden Archaeology. A lot of things that have been hidden away from official society, so to speak, in order not to disturb or get people upset or worried about, the evolution consensus. There's a lot of anomalies of ancient civilizations that have been already actually far more advanced than we are. You know, with this evolutionary model, we believe ourselves on the pinnacle of evolution. We are like everything, whoever was in the past was primitive because they didn't have the kind of technology, right? So to speak.
Sure, but even the advanced civilizations prior to us are still within the realm of a couple thousand, 10,000 years. Is that
100,000, yeah.
100,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so now the follow-up question to that is, if not evolution in the way that we're taught evolution, then what is the explanation for humans?
Well, based on my own revelations and research, know that part of it is that we have been partially also interfered with, quote unquote created, genetically modified by alien forces, entities in whatever shape and form, physically, hyperdimensionally, and kind of disconnected us from our original genetic blueprint, the fall from Eden, right? The fall from our original state, which ironically, paradoxically, was also a free will decision to experience this ego consciousness, so to speak, in this game, drama, comedy, horror show we experience right now to find our way back home.
Three-ring circus.
So to speak, Now the irony, you see the opposite of this evolutionary Darwinist theory is the religious, dogmatic, fundamentalist conditioning, creationist. God created the world in 7 days, and the world is only 5,000 years old. That's the other extreme, the either or. So, but maybe it is like something in between neither, right? But there's something else we haven't really considered, and that we may not be here the main show on planet Earth.
Okay, so I think it's going to be, we need to definitely put a flag in that one and make sure we climb back up that mountain of not being the main show on Earth. Okay, let's come back just a little bit. When did the then transition occur? Were we ever a very embodied species prior to this disconnect? And how long ago do you think that was?
I mean, the different sources, I cannot give you like a definite answer because a lot of it is also just hypothesis theory, so to speak. Even the when you think about the evolution is also just a theory, or a Big Bang is a theory, even scientifically spoken, right? But various resources, it's about between 300,000 or 500,000 years ago in linear time, so to speak, from various sources. And but what's important to keep in mind that we are still being interfered with and modified in different ways, which you see in this day and age.
Let's do it. Let's climb
right
up
now,
that.
I mean, we can
Let's do it.
dig in the past. But I just want to say something.
Yeah.
This is my in terms of the past, because people talk about how people, the ancient cultures, the pyramid cultures, Egyptians, or back even more ancient Lemurian. You can go into Atlantis, which is a whole mystery in itself, right? That there's no evidence archaeologically, but we have been so conditioned and programmed, especially this day and age with the rise of technology. We think we're so advanced because we have all these gadgets, right? But I realize more and more that this is actually a reaction or expression of externalizing technology because we have disconnected or have purposely been disconnected from our own body technology, inner technology. in terms of powers we have. You can manipulate reality and move up, like through states of consciousness we cannot even possibly imagine right now. So we're more and more dependent of the technology, and if you see it, how the world and the culture and the matrix works, it makes us even more dependent of it all, to get us out of body even more, until we merge with machine, and that's the other topic.
So maybe we'll get there, but,
right, but go back to what
paraphrase and summarize this. So the dependency on the embodiment in this complex, beautiful, intricate soul that we have right here in every single one of us, to have then put this to the side for all of the gadgets and the technology, for the rockets and the computers and all of the stuff, and the dependency now on those technologies, interestingly enough, is potentially disconnecting us further from our embodiment.
Very important.
But also simultaneously, yes, maybe thousands, tens of thousands, even more years ago, there were a higher level of embodiment, and therefore then doing things like astral projection and all these kinds of amazing entry points into places that are not the three-dimensional reality. People's ability to tune into that with all these lost civilizations that could have been more advanced than us. But as we progress further, it's looking like it's super important for the embodiment, which can also be kind of talked about as femininity. We talked about vulnerability and emotion and feeling, which we're really excited to be doing our next show with Justine Musk, we're gonna definitely unpack that in so much detail. Super different from this intellectual rockets and computers, but blending those two together, do you not think is then the ideal?
No, that's the actually agenda of the ultimate, what I call the end game of the hyperdimensional matrix.
Is to blend the embodiment with the technology?
In order to fully extract the soul from the body, and for these forces to build our bodies for incarnational opportunities, to incarnate fully.
Say that again, I'm sorry. Say that again one more time.
Basically design our bodies in a sense to completely disconnect us from our essence, from our soul, extract the soul, and build our bodies as incarnational opportunities for them to incarnate, because they cannot exist in a 3D reality. Right?
What does
that's a whole. If you want to talk, we probably need to establish what is the hyperdimensional matrix.
Let's do that. Let's do that. I really like how you went with the embodiment and the technology. Now let's explain the hyperdimensional matrix, and then let's also talk about where this sort of, we can also mention, this also ties into UFO, this also ties into the, basically, which we've mentioned so many times on the show, not only by asking our guests the question, are we alone in the cosmos, but also by the posts that we made about we are not at the top of the cosmic food chain. We are probably not, we are very likely not at the top of the cosmic food chain. So what does all of that mean? What is the hyperdimensional matrix control system?
Right. Well, in a nutshell, hyperdimensional means non-physical, right? Meaning existing outside our five sensory perception. And we know, even eyesight is very limited. A lot of dimensions we cannot, or densities we cannot tune into. So there's a lot happening we just simply are not aware of, right? So that hyperdimensional means non-physical. So matrix, what is the matrix, right? Obviously it relates to the film The Matrix, which by the way is an excellent, amazing film in terms of deep esoteric analogies.
Could be one of the best films of all time.
I mean, I feel, on the side note, I don't think even the filmmakers were aware of what they were, what was coming through, basically.
Right.
But the way I structure it, and then people again, they can go to my website, obviously, for much deeper
link in bio,
overview,
veilofreality.com,
and videos and resources. But I kind of divided in, to simplify it, so to speak, in 3 levels. There's a physical matrix, as I see it, the physical control system, the obvious for the ones who already start questioning how we're being controlled and conditioned and programmed via government institutions, corporations, the banking system, right? Or religion, academia, media, and all of that, education, our minds are being formed, we're literally being programmed. On the very basics, for example, a basic matrix program a lot of people don't question is identification with the country or nation, right? Boom.
Or nationalism.
So it's already like you're identifying with a complete abstract concept that has no basis in nature, right? And that already creates separation and fragmentation.
Money is very similar.
Money itself, money in itself, that's a whole topic on its own.
Wealthy people mistake
But mistaking abundance of money or taking the material, right?
Or intelligence, or...
Exactly. So that's kind of like most people where people are aware of, right? That level of the matrix. Well, then you can go a little deeper, which I call the deeper level of the 3D matrix, which then we go into like the shadow government. We go into the Rothschilds, the Bilderberg group, right? Or the what people call the Illuminati and all of that, the Zionists or black government projects, secret space program, chemtrails, geoengineering, all of that. Many people are not aware of that, but on the ground level, these are still just symptoms or expressions, manifestations of the hyperdimensional matrix, the non-physical, which is basically on the root. I like the analogy of the tree, like the outer matrix, right, on the trees, on the branches, and the hyperdimensional matrix hidden in the ground in the root, right?
So looking down from the leaves, you can't see the roots,
so to speak. Yeah. And what forces are behind that? Well, if you really study various esoteric teachings throughout the ages, in their own words, talked about this force that has control over humanity and uses humans as an energy source, food source, so to speak. And any culture
and just to make sure that this is understandable, similar to how humans also use other animals and plants as our food source.
Life feeds on life, and as above, so below, right? But on that realm, food is nothing physical, but consciousness is food. And these beings, forces, which have been named different names, different labels throughout the ages, different teachings, but they literally talk about the same, be it from the Gnostics, the archons, for example, right? The jinn from the Sufism
Explain
tradition.
that a little bit for us.
The
archons.
The archon. Yeah, I'm just naming like the different, how these forces were named, right?
And who made the naming, and what does the naming mean?
Archon it's also relates to ruler, like rulers, so to speak, And in Sri Aurobindo's, even in Indian mystical teachings, the integral yoga, the occult forces, the occult simply means hidden, right? Or adverse forces. Then I'm sure, you guys have heard of Paul Levy's book. I highly recommend, actually for a guest too here, his book, Dispelling Wetiko. Wetiko is like this from the Native American spiritual tradition, this alien virus that has overtaken humanity, right? You see it actually in esoteric Christianity, before the church corrupted the teaching and used it turned into dogmatic religion, talking about the general law, right? That kind of keeps humanity in its place, this force. Gurdjieff talked about that a lot, right? And various others, it ties into the UFO phenomenon as well, right? Because it's interesting, this phenomena also, this hyperdimensional matrix adjusts itself to the zeitgeist or the area or almost belief system of humanity. It's very shape-shifting, right? That's why it can be so deceptive. That's why this whole UFO topic, an alien topic, and ETs, it's a whole can of worms in itself. John Keel, he wrote an excellent book already, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, Operation Trojan Horse, which I can highly recommend, where he talked about this UFO phenomenon, how manipulative and deceptive it is, how it adjusts, in certain ways. But again, going back to the essence of it, so these forces have manipulated humanity over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to keep us in this lower state of egoic consciousness, of lower frequency of separation, the illusion of separation and survival, right, and security thinking. Basically a fear frequency, right? So And then by disconnecting us even more from spirit and from nature, right, we all experience loneliness in our lives. Like it's almost this original abandonment from source, right? We feel lost. And then through the conditioning, we're being, it results in this body-mind split, as I talked before, so we get more into our head. So the more you're up in your head, you're disconnected from here, from source, you're externally more looking for answers, somebody to tell you what to do. And that results into the savior program, which is a huge part of the matrix, the savior program, right? You see it also in the religion, which also these forces have manipulated and installed, the religious savior program. You see the savior program in politics, when they're waiting for the next puppet, in office to save the day, so to speak.
Can you unpack that a little? Because I don't subscribe to, democracy or voting for a better life for all of us.
That's government in its essence, actually an archonic creation, also instilled by these forces. But we've been living under these systems for so long, we don't question them anymore. It's a massive collective Stockholm syndrome of authoritarian followers, right? So, but going back, the whole agenda behind this hyperdimensional matrix is we're being farmed for our essence, for energy. It's similar like in the film The Matrix. These machines, when Neo wakes up out of his sleeping state, right, unplugs himself, he sees this feeding field of humans, where these machines grow humans and feed off of them, right? Well, you can kind of substitute these machines for these hyperdimensional, non-physical, occult forces. And what do they feed off? It's like these lower vibrational frequencies, especially war, which they create through the human puppets in government and place in positions of power to create maximum suffering, or it can be as little from interpersonal fighting, even on the basic political agenda. We see it now in the US. The fact that, with Trump puppet in office, it brought up this huge shadow of the liberals, Democrats, progressive, who just project all their hate and anger and disgust on the guy, and they're fighting each other, in a sense. The left versus the right creates all the emotional luge for these forces to feed upon. They couldn't care less who's in power as long as they can create this frequency. So that's on the ground, the root of the issue is this hyperdimensional force, and it works through these institutions. And most of us people, even well-meaning people, I'm not denying their intentions, focus on mistake symptoms for causes, right? Or as in Plato's famous allegory of the cave, they're just fighting shadows on the wall. Or like with the tree analogy, it's like cutting the trees, the branches of the tree, but they will grow back anyway in another form. And in the political arena, it's like on top levels, the left and the right are identical. It doesn't fucking matter. Right? And even on the outer level, the president, even Trump, is not really in charge to begin with. I mean, it is a three-ring circus sideshow.
Is there any hope for local politics, community politics, voting for the town selectmen, or we have a mayoral race coming up here?
Yeah, but it's like you got to go deeper than that, because we have to ask ourselves fundamental questions. Right? And more than anything, trying to fix it out there, what's going on within you, right? Our own conditioning, right? Our own program, our own wounds, right? And I have to drop
Swami Ananda's quote: "Inner management is the key to unlock your infinite human potential."
Exactly, and then you align yourself more and more, like we've talked before, your inner potential, your soul, purpose, what you're truly here to do, to contribute, to help raise the level of consciousness. Right?
That's good for those that understand it and practice it, but we're also looking at people that want to be led, want to be told where to go, what to do. Good luck to them.
That's exactly what Bernhard was saying earlier. He was saying when the disconnect occurs from the embodiment and the head's poking around and going, where do I get my source of information from? Who do I follow right now? Is it the government? Is it these figures? Is it politicians? Where am I looking? Who am I finding? How can I get? But it's always right in here. and it's always been right in here.
Yeah.
And only when we can figure it out from inside do we then, like you said, the veil that is put right here in front of our eyes that's covering that up, do we pierce through that, and then we get to understanding the nature of things as they are, and not as the way that government, money, borders, nationalism, all these things have made it seem to be.
Right. And that is also the key actually to conscious true reality creation, which the New Age has completely distorted, right? I mean, that's a whole other, the New Age religion and a lot of spiritual teaching, how they have also become distorted, right? There's a lot of, just as we need to question the mainstream, we need to question a lot of spiritual teachings and New Age and even alternative stuff out there. It's a big swamp. It's like a maze, right? But going back to what you said, it's about then essentially not fighting the matrix, but transcending it through a high level. It's all about frequency, right? And transcending doesn't mean escaping it either. It kind of ties into the esoteric saying to be in this world but not of this world, right? So you really build this, how it is called in esoteric science, the magnetic center within, right? This 0-point non-reactive consciousness. You're just fully integrated, embodied, which embodiment actually means soul individualization. It doesn't mean necessarily just be in your body, right? It's actually an esoteric process of growing your soul and establishing this conscious link. And we have that then nothing on the outside can affect you, can trigger you, can throw you off. You're sovereign, right? And then you consciously respond instead of react. Most people react. Most of us, we react and we mechanically react under the illusion of free will, right? Or as Gurdjieff talked, the masses are so mechanical, they dream to be awake, but they're still asleep. And when you engage in this deeper self-work, right, what means self-work? It starts with basic self-observation, meditation, to really be able to create this external witness to observe yourself, your feelings, your action. You realize how complicated you are, right? How you have all kinds of contradictory wants, needs, desires, and you realize they're not even your own, they've been conditioned from the outside. And that at some point you come face to face with what Gurdjieff called the horror of the situation, which is not only the external craziness and forces acting upon us, but our own sleeplessness state and your own mechanical behavior. And it's so mechanical that sometimes at the beginning you may be aware of it, but you're still like doing it anyway. So it's in quite an intense process, right? And but the way I relate it in a metaphysical way, when you really work through it, through your wounding conditioning and seek truth within and without, and establish that direct link, that connection to your true soul, your true being, that has tremendous effects on outer reality, right? That's how reality is being created. That's because the outer is in the end just a reflection of the inner itself, right? The reason why the outside is such a mesh, because people are such a mesh inside in many ways. But the reality creation aspect is not like the New Age tries to tell me of just thinking of positive thoughts and smiling, everything will be fine, and this positivity, it's a trap in itself. I'm not saying to not be positive, but it's like a lot of people who engage in it, they just have a deep shadow and just Jungian way, right? It just keeps suppressing and needs to come up in some other way. So shadow work is the name of the game in itself. It's a descent and ascent at the same time. So that's kind of like how it relates to, in terms of metaphysically transcending the matrix rather than trying to fight it. Because fighting it as well means that you feel something is wrong in reality. Somebody made a mistake, right? We need to fix things. But who are you to say that something is wrong with reality? It's like, are you God? That's what, for me, the most profound experience or realization of the past few years, that there's nothing wrong with reality. It doesn't mean that I'm just sitting back and like whatever in apathy, right? That kind of trap in itself. No, I need to play my part in my role, but nothing is here what shouldn't be here, right? Everything plays its part because everything, bless you, Gesundheit, everything is interrelated. Ironically, everything is one, right? That's the irony. But on this lower level of 3D, there are vast different expressions of the one. And we are also not all the same, which is another topic.
Not all men are created equal.
Very true. Yeah, that's actually a true esoteric law, which will probably trigger a few social justice warriors.
And there's a good amount of backlash that's currently coming to people that are talking about the genetic disparities between people on the planet. And I think it's things like IQ and conscientiousness and emotional spirituality, that being able to touch into these different things. There are disparities between people in that sense, and everybody then have the potential? Everyone has the potential, but
May have the
potential, but the cultural fabric impedes that potential from coming to life.
You got to first understand that, and then you got to rise above it. When he says, don't fight the matrix, I just call it, playing the game. Just play the game, and use the good, the bad, and the ugly as tools, and make a decision how you want to be. If I want to be a dick, which I probably am at times, most of the time, but if I want to be more of a dick, I can be, but I choose not to be, and that's people choose the.
Well, at least you're able to consciously choose when you know. Some people don't know when they're.
Yeah, that's sad, and I don't know what to do about that, and I can't. All I can do is just avoid them, or, I know I'm not going to change them. I learned, I can't change how somebody is. I can only change how I react to them, and that took me a while to, practice that. You've heard it growing up, and there's truth in that.
Yeah.
So
let's stay there, because that was also in relation to what Bernhard said, which was that the change comes from within. The reality outside is right where it's supposed to be. And if everyone tunes into themselves and makes their inner management work and foster their divinity, that transcendence of the matrix, then the world around them slowly gets better over time, but everybody needs to tune in and make that inner work along the way. So let's revisit a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. So we had these initial tangibles. Okay, so hyperdimensional matrix control system. So these tangibles, these most immediate three-dimensional things, are like things like money, or things like the borders that we have around us, and these are things that are not normally what would happen in nature. These are constructs that we've created, or that have been created through us into the world by what exists outside of the three dimension. Then there's another layer, so that was the three-dimensional one. Then the next layer is kind of the control layer of who from the hyperdimensional control matrix is being the puppeteers of what is actually going on in this base 3D reality, which is then maybe the Rothschilds, the Bilderbergs, Illuminatis, what's been going on with all these different governmental programs that have been run in complete secrecy. We don't still have so much evidence for so many of the things that people are asking for, and immediately they are called out for being lunatics, conspiracy theorists. They're immediately shut down, and that's
how it works. Yeah. That's how the damage,
Yeah. So
also you have to see, like, on that note, just reminds me,
yes,
the way society and culture is set up right now. If you go speak out about these topics, your chances of success and fame, whatever people strive of, money, is severely diminished. Anybody in a position of fame, or like in the position of public, let's take whatever, celebrities, actors, whoever is out there, you cannot even, I remember, remember Charlie Sheen, actually? He was the only one who challenged and questioned 9/11 many years ago. That was before he got crazy. So it's really interesting, actually, what happened to me in the light of the Matrix, because he's the only Hollywood actor I know really deeply questioned the official 9/11 story. He was even writing a letter to Obama and reinvestigate, boom, boom. So, it was really coherent, rational, and then a year later, boom, you saw what happened to him. So that's, for me, you almost got,
Who's the other one that recently went into the middle of Hollywood and was like, what is reality anyway, in the middle of his interview?
Oh, you mean like Jim Carrey?
Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like he's kind of more like this philosophical.
But even then, it's still interesting that these little bubble ups are occurring.
Yeah, bubble ups. But
I
I'm
have
saying
a quick point about the hyperdimensional control system that I want to address. Yeah. So, because I think this is important to communicate from your essence through to the viewership. Okay, so after this money, after these borders, after these social constructs we've created, after these governmental organizations and banks and societies of Bilderbergs, Rothschilds, etc., what exists outside of that? Tell us about that essence, because it has something to do a little bit with the UFO story as well. It has to do a little bit with what is invisible to the human senses, what exists past the three-dimensional reality, what exists otherwise in the cosmos and beyond, what is that meshing of the God and the religion with the science and the evolution, what exists outside of that you've been describing to us that could be what is really occurring in that hyperdimensional state, that is feeding off of some fear, that is feeding off of the political gridlock that exists.
That's that relates that the ultimate modus operandi of these hyperdimensional forces is divide and conquer. That's the best way to take over a whole race. And that's what's happening. Humans has always just fighting each other constantly. And how? Because of either religious beliefs or national identification.
And greed,
and
power,
money. And greed and power and money. See, that's also that ties also into psychopaths, right? People who are genetically born without a conscience. About
1%.
About 6 to 8% of humanity, right? Current various sources. And these psychopaths are fully occupied by these, they have no soul, literally. They look human, but they're not human, right? But what I'm saying, what we see from the outer level, we always feel on the political level or corporation level, they all just want more power and money and more for themselves, and that's true on that level. But since they're also just puppet of these forces, again, these forces are just out for that frequency, that luge, that food. So in the end, it's not about the money, right? It's just another symptom of the greed of this divide and conquer agenda to create this frequency, this luge by pitting humans against each other.
And
right?
taking in food from that essence
from
of
the essence
fear.
that whatever created through that friction, right?
And now tell us, what is that entity? I know it's difficult to put into words, but
why don't you go find out for yourself, Alan?
why don't you go
Why don't you go ask these questions instead of asking us? Why don't you go find them?
1 second, I'll be right back. I'm there.
I don't think you can define it as one thing. There's a high strangeness aspect to it, right? In terms of being shapeshifters, and you cannot just, and you have to understand, the mind cannot fully understand it. It's like you can give concepts and we describe it, but it ties into what Sri Aurobindo talked about. It's part of esoteric work to develop yogic consciousness, right, where you can perceive these forces directly, in a sense, and like we briefly touched upon before, right? Remember, it's not necessarily that you perceive them visually. I don't. I'm never stated. I'm not a clairvoyant, right? I know of people who do, but it's more like establishing sixth sense cognition, where the intellect, the logic, the five senses cannot go. And it's more, it's a knowing I cannot even put into words, right? I cannot possibly prove it to you scientifically, because science, and then when it's based on the five senses, right? But that is also like, it relates to the tried, the way we perceive knowledge and understanding is not just information, right? It depends on your level of being, means level of soul embodiment, soul individualization. And it relates to, for example, what Gurdjieff talked about, the triad of knowledge, being, and understanding, right? And it's all interrelated. And people think the more knowledge you have, the more understanding you have, which is not true. Because if knowledge is not matched up with being, with embodiment, it just results in information like intellectual masturbation, but not true understanding, which is wisdom. So it goes hand in hand.
Weren't we talking about that the other day?
Yeah, we were at Harvard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give us your quick bit, because I have another subject that we haven't mentioned too much that I think we need to touch on. Give us that one more time on knowledge and wisdom. Intellectual masturbation with these facts versus the embodiment. The soul understanding is then wisdom.
Yeah, so to speak. Yeah, exactly. Wisdom is like embodied knowledge, like you apply. It's not just...
Okay, wisdom is embodied knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That I think is good. Okay. And that was what we were talking about at Harvard too. Longer conversation, solved right here today. But there's so much more, not solved. But that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into this. So, like you said, it's extremely difficult to figure out what it is. It requires a development of a sixth sense, some sort of another tapping into the unknown with something that is already limited to a human cognition and embodiment's very difficult to do. But whatever that is has some sort of fingers in what is going on today, which we were trying to discuss earlier, which we are discussing. Now, let's talk about this because we haven't yet fully unpacked this yet. You started unpacking it, and I think it's one of your videos. We need to talk about this love. The fact that we are all saying love. Okay, because this is something that Ron has definitely been helping teach me along our journey together. Because I am a very positive, meditative, optimistic, but also realistic person, and I very infrequently will call people out for their negativity, or them being like cancerous, or them being malevolent beings, or them, etc. All these different things. But recently, Ron's helped me realize that, like, Alan, let that come up every once in a while too. Let it come up, because you need to figure out where that line is to push away and go forth. And so I want you to expand on this, because your video.
Love reality in the time of transition.
Love reality in the time of transition, right under your films page on your website. You give a very, very good, poignant understanding that we cannot just go around and not call out these things. We can't just go around saying love, 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 love. And right now, eventually, maybe one day, when everybody is practicing inner management and we are all transcending, then love, love, love. But for the state of now, go ahead.
I do not think we are going to get there. It's not how the universe works. There is not going to be a utopian future. If we're all going to be love, 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 we're all going to be mindless zombies programmed into that. And that's what I think you should be. I'm fearful of. That's not what I really want.
But you missed the link that I gave. The link that I gave was that it comes from it comes from the practice of the inner management and that transcendence. If everyone does focus in on that, then it is possible to maybe get to a point. Go ahead.
Evil loves.
Okay, let's have Bernhard explain this.
Well, several things. One thing he said, everyone.
Yes.
Who is everyone and who are we?
Let's say human souls.
Humans. Okay, but what I'm saying is it also like several things to consider. Okay, love. You know, love is probably one of the most abused words besides God, so to speak, I would say.
I'm like, Ron, I love you. He's like, Alan, I love Chinese food.
Exactly.
Everybody.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, we're talking about, I love my country. How can you love in the true meaning of the word, abstract concept of that's unnatural, right? I love that, you know, those are good examples. Now, we all learn the lessons of love in various ways. And ironically, this whole time of transition, we're in this whole soul evolution, where everything is about, for me, all these are lessons in the end of the day in light of soul evolution, wherever you're at. And you can also say the lessons in love, right? Ultimately, the irony is the true soul state, the true self's pure state is love and joy, right? But it does not depend on anything outside at all, right? So But it is also not an emotion. It's not just feeling of, which the New Age has hijacked, right? This whole like, just feel with you, just this heart thing, right? Which also mistaken for many, many, many different things. Now, my personal, relationships, we all struggling with that, love, And in the beginning, when we fall in love, it already says it, right? You should rise in love, but you have all these emotions coming, these feelings, these projections.
Ooh, that was such a good one. We rise into love. That's
right.
That's such a good one.
Yeah. So, but we mistake that actually also as love, or even like chemical, processes that happen based on the biology or biological programming to procreate, right, and all of that. So we mistake many things for love.
I talk about that so much. We are so manipulated
and then also,
by our genetics for procreation.
Between two people, it will, you see the divorce rate, or when people separate, like what then? Was it true love? What is it really, right? And sometimes love turns into hate, the opposite. Then what was it really? Was it true love? So what is love? And then we also condition on the romantic level just through Hollywood romance films and all of that, for example, on a partnership level. But who really opened my eyes, that was also in the 90s when I came across Jiddu Krishnamurti's writing. Have you heard of him? I call him I love him. He's I love him.
I love him.
I love him. I do though, no. He's like a spiritual anarchist. He renounced his position from some order and don't follow me. No, truth cannot be organized, right? No institution, no religion, no group, no nothing, right? It's just you and your own process in life and connection. But he wrote,
truth cannot be organized at all.
He gave this great parable on that note real quick. I want to mention him. And when he denounced his leadership from that order, they put him in actually. He gave this little story about a man and the devil go on a walk, and then they see another man pick up some truth, right? And then the guy says to the devil, "Oh, this guy found some truth. Isn't it bad for you?" And the devil responds, "Don't worry, let him organize it." So that's that's also for me in my work. I don't take anything on a foundation. I don't attach to one teaching. I don't join any groups or movements or any of that. I'm not part of any of that. I used to and learned the hard way.
Can't structuring truth be very beneficial to organizing and designing civilization to maximize prosperity?
Hold on, let's go back to the love.
Let's go back to the love first.
Yeah. I want to say to Krishnamurti, he asked the question that really opened. That was just such a aha moment for me. We can only understand love by pointing out what love is not. Right? Is passion love? Is envy love? Is jealousy love? Is attachment love? Right? Is possession love? Like all these things we actually, especially in relationships, some people, when they're jealous, they say this as, "See, I'm jealous, that means I'm in love with you." So we have convoluted this whole thing so badly, right? And then I realized also for myself, I'm not here who have realized full love. I'm not awakened, enlightened, or embodied. I'm learning my lessons as they,
likewise,
on the road. Right?
All of us, yeah.
Sometimes the hard way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, most often anyway. But it relates to go back to the different levels of love as well. One can experience going back to one's level of being and soul embodiment. Right. A lot of people experience love more on a very visceral level, right? Of being just physical, sexual, emotional level, and and it's kind of like this contract, so to speak. Here's something I can do for you, and you do this for me, basically, right? That kind of love we see a lot of in the majority, I feel, in civilization, so to speak, on that level, right? And there are higher states of love, right? You go more into the unconditional love of being, which relates to your level of being, right? To the point when you're truly filled with it and embodied with this, not feeling of love, but it's, from an esoteric perspective, actually love is light, is knowledge. Love is knowledge. In esoteric Christianity, they talk about that love is knowledge, but knowledge is not what we mistake it for, this intellectual, memorized thing. Now, knowledge goes back to understanding being, of just you see things for what they are. right? Unconditionally. That's the true love. And so
And
it's hard-
vibrating at that.
and that it's a vibration, and it's a state of consciousness, right? Love, rather than a feeling,
That's right.
right? And again, that vast different levels, depending on, because we are all different inside as well. That's why I asked you, everyone, we are vastly different. Vastly different levels of consciousness with 7 billion people on this planet in terms of what level of love they are actually able to access and able to give and also to receive. So it's hard to give a generalization of what is love and what you need to do to get there.
That's good. I think normally when I think about 7.5 billion people, I think about the ways that we can all find ways to work together over time. And I think about it in that sense. But when you bring it up in a way of the different levels of consciousness in their ability to love and receive love, give love.
I mean, excuse me, many things you cannot just teach or tell another person.
That they have to
experience
survive
themselves,
to.
part of the soul lesson, so whatever, that is not under you or anyone's control.
Okay, thought along this topic. How can you, if that is then the truth, that it can't just be, hey, like love each other, if that's right, how can one then figure out what are your recommendations over your learning experiences of figuring out how to transcend, how to embody the soul within, and then play, dance with reality in a way that maximizes collective flourishing? Give us your perspective on that.
In terms of my process to connect to that?
Connect to that, and then in the reality, figure out how you can play with reality to maximize the collective.
You know what, in my process in terms of accessing this deeper love, a big part of it has been actually my own suffering, to dive deep into the areas in my being I didn't want to look at, to feel the feelings I've been running away from.
Yeah.
All the dark shadow in the unconscious.
Yeah.
Right? Almost like when you engage sincerely, emphasis sincerely in the process of awakening, right? First thing you realize, the self-responsibility you have to take and radical self-honesty. And you cannot blame anything or anyone anymore. And that opens up a lot. Right.
Cannot blame anyone or anything anymore. All me.
Well, but also in the sense you don't want to that's kind of the parallel. You don't want to blame yourself either, because that I used to going down the guilt and shame spiral.
Yeah, explain
right?
this, yes.
So it's transcending it all, right? But still taking that responsibility, to respond. You dive deep, and then the more I really work through my own wounds, conditioning, past life, accumulated, whatever stuff, which oftentimes comes out in relationship, like people are mirrors. Like the shadow comes through projections or triggers, basic Jungian psychology, right? Or these forces I talk about, how they interfere with us, can also only interfere or hook into us where we have our own blind spots and wounds and issues. Hence you can even, which they heighten, you can utilize them actually as teachers. So they're not evil in that sense. Even evil, we can go all around, plays its purpose, so to speak, in the evolution of consciousness. It has its right to exist, as part of the dualities. It's free will to exist. But in my own process, the more was, that's why you see in any esoteric teachings, or Sri Aurobindo talked about, no one can reach heaven without having walked through hell. Heaven meaning also finding that joy, embodied love, that does, that the true thing that doesn't depend on anything else. But you need to dive down into the cave, into the underworld, to clear everything out that obstructs the divine force to anchor itself within you. And I've noticed the paradox, right? The higher I go, the deeper I need to fall, or the deeper I fall, the higher I can rise. It's a descent and ascent at the same time.
Yeah.
And now I realize, the way I express myself, people sometimes project all kinds of things into me when they come across my work, what I post on Facebook, because I talk fair bit amount about the hyperdimensional matrix, occult forces, and the dark side. Simply, that's also my path. And by the way, I talk about many other things, also about the positive divine forces. But I deal with a lot of projections of people, especially if they don't know me personally, that I engage in fear-mongering, that recently somebody told me that I must live in fear and paranoia and depression all the time because I talk about these things. I'm like, couldn't be furthest from the truth. You know, with everything I've been through, and, you know, I've been through a lot of my own tribulations, attacks, and, you know, initiations and whatnot, it has really helped me to come to a very place of more genuine love and compassion. Empathy comes from me easier. I'm more like just at ease of everything, more acceptance, right? Not acceptance, not in terms of conformity, right? But I'm also like, you know, true love underlined, true aspect of love is also this compassion, empathy, right? Like when you also don't feel yourself superior, which is a trap in itself. When you start to wake up and like, oh, the sheeple, you know, I fell into that. We all fall into that, right? But then, totally before, like when I was in downtown waiting for you guys, and I live out in nature, I don't see that many people anymore. So I was like, whoa, the energy isn't just people watching. It was very fascinating, and it was like, and tuning into them, feeling them, and you see how the majority, like on autopilot, there's nobody home, right? It's just so mechanically, like zombies. And I'm like, not from his perspective, or like everybody's just, you know, they're fucked up, but like they don't know what they're doing. It's just so just see it for what it is, right? And with also that compassion and empathy, right? Of just like that it is what it is, right? Without the judgment either, right? So that's for me expressions of love, right? Of like this state of being and consciousness, and it shows itself in everyday situations, right? And that's, you know, the more we tap into that, the more we radiate that, right? The more we affect other people's positively with our frequency and energy, in the true meaning of the word, right? When we carry that embodied frequency, that shows itself, for example, in my body work or healing hands-on work, which some has quite a profound effect on some of my clients. It's not just because of the technique, it's not because of me, whatever, but also more about the frequency you start to carry within yourself and can affect people even more effectively than trying to convince people by logic or rational discourse alone, which I've done that a lot, trying to convince, you know, because of these different levels of consciousness, some people simply won't get it. It's even beyond cognitive dissonance because they're simply not on a level of consciousness. Again, there's no value judgment to understand certain topics.
Probably one of the most easiest ways to understand that is when you're in a conversation with somebody and then one person, if the other person in this case, begins to get up in their energy level and angry. Yeah. If you retort with that anger and that upper energy level, it's going to be an endless pop. But if you stay calm and lean back a bit and be very gentle with the energy, their energy will drop down to your energy as well over time. And I think that right there can be a really good way to understand control. You mentioned this earlier, the reactionary versus cognition. So the more that you you're waiting with your patience and you're cognizing and you're just absorbing the what's going on rather than immediately reacting to it, the more you'll find yourself in a position of I'm in control of what's going on, and you feel better about that process.
That's a very important point. That's what the self-work comes in. And as I mentioned before, the basic foundation of self-work is self-observation. To not react, but observe. Yeah. So very importantly, you mentioned in discussion, most people then become very mechanical. They don't even listen to each other anymore.
Correct.
When somebody talks, you know, you're already like thinking in your mind what you're going to say without even taking the person's point in at all.
Yeah.
So when you listen, for example, even to an opposing point, you know, it's really important to like stay within and observe what's the trigger, right? What's triggering me, you know, the emotions come up.
Yeah.
And like, and just observing without reacting to it. Because it shows you a lot about yourself. You can learn a lot about yourself in that moment. And then you can respond.
Correct.
So to speak, there's Jacob Needleman. He's a Gurdjieff scholar and teacher, and he had this great exercise with his students. He said, like, you know, like said in general, when, you know, you get into the debate, like you said, with somebody's complete opposing viewpoint, before you respond to that person when he makes, summarize his or her point.
Is this the Steelman guy? What's his name?
Jacob Needleman.
Jacob Needleman. I wonder if that's the Steelman guy. There's a difference between steel manning and straw manning people's arguments.
Okay.
And this is exactly what you're bringing up right now. If two people are disagreeing on something, to straw man them is to take what they said in the worst possible context and do a really bad job at summarizing what
Jordan
they
Peterson
said.
experienced with that on Channel
With
4.
that Kathy Newman interview. Exactly. And then steel manning is to take what somebody says when they're finished, summarize it in a way that they go, wow, that was good.
I like that. I never heard that steel man.
Steel man versus straw man. I'm glad now it's here.
Okay.
So then once you steel man somebody and they go, whoa, that was a really good summary, then only at that point can you either add something on top of it and be like, this, or take it and say, that's wrong because of this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just because they summarize it doesn't mean that you agree with it. You know, so, but that's really important because I experience it a lot of my work, especially on Facebook, right? So I post certain quotes, excerpts, my own things with the link, and people right away disagree with this and this, but like I think the majority never actually reads the whole article in context, right? And people comment on something before they have an opinion about something, before they have actually made the effort to understand the context, of why it was posted and what it relates to, so to speak, and then it's taken out of context, which is the usual fallacy, right? Taking things out of context, and it results always in straw man arguments, constantly.
Social media is straw manville everywhere alive on social media. It's just straw manning. And guess what? Steel manning is best for in person.
True, yeah.
It is
it's
not,
true.
it's so, because here's what happens on social media. On social media, if you invest your time into conversation on social media, at best, it's one person, two people, maybe 10 or 100 people at best, potentially reading that text that you or I are investing time into. Other people who have millions of followers might get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that read that text. But even then, they are still, your time investment that you're putting into that is almost always better for something that looks closer to reality, which is either the 3D in person or on video.
No, I agree.
Rather than text.
No, I know my friends, I like writing. I'm like on the computer, like on the internet and use it, but I'm the worst texter. Like I don't like texting and chatting even because it gets me up here and so much is missing. And then people misinterpret words or project emotions in the words that wasn't said. There's so much miscommunication all the time. It's one-on-one. Even Skype is better to see the person, the energy, the body language, the eyes. So much nonverbal communication is missing.
Yes.
Right?
All
the time.
I totally agree with you. I'm really happy we're bringing this up, especially for one of the things that we talk about on the show so much is when you observe this content, it's so important to take what you see here and think about it in your own way, get inspired by it, and go do something in the world with it. Go and talk about it with other people, maybe start a project with it, but go outside and do something with this content. Our content, just for consuming purposes, is not enough. It's got to be for inspirational purposes as well, to go and get inspired to do something as well, which is a crucial pillar of what we're doing. There's got to be something that is on your mind that we should mention as we come to a close on the episode.
No, I mean it flowed pretty well. So I'm just like I'm in no mind right now. I didn't have anything in my head.
That's excellent. Ron, do you have something on your mind that we should talk about?
Well, I do because I'm. Like, what are the benefits when I talk about I want to be a better person going out than when I came in? Is there any benefit to that? Or should I just enjoy myself like I'm doing? I don't believe, death is the end of it all. I think this, my conscience is going to die, that this energy is going to be transferred. But, I think the other side is far more chaotic than this 3D reality. I don't know what my question is. I really don't.
Then let me swing in quick then with this. In addition to what we discussed today, we mentioned this a couple times throughout, is the idea of having service be to yourself or service be to other people. And that brings me a lot of meaning and fulfillment into my life. And I know it has for so many other people over the last 4 years of interfacing with people that care about science, that care about entrepreneurship, that care about trying to make the world better, eradicate suffering in many ways, although suffering eradication does have to come from within. If something can trigger the person to see within.
Do you want to talk, mention that topic of suffering?
Let's do it.
It's just a little thing, because I just realized that also over the years. And that's a paradox within. Because I realized, like I mentioned before, the main catalyst for what I'm doing now has been suffering. And there's also almost like an esoteric axiom that people don't truly start to question the world, seek truth, let alone engage in deep esoteric self-work until they suffer. So suffering has its purpose in that sense as well, in light of the evolution of consciousness. And ironically, or paradoxically, but also you engage yourself to get away from suffering, right? To get out of the wheel of samsara, right? To get, that's the whole, you want to awaken to your true nature, you don't suffer anymore, right? But in the end, suffering was needed to get you there. It's that paradox. That was a very interesting line I read by the mother from Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo and Mother's Integral Yoga. And one of the students asked her, like, why is there suffering? What's the role of suffering? And she said something profound. She said, it really made me pause and just contemplate. She said that suffering is the only force or energy that can wake up matter out of its inertia. So, it has its place, that suffering. And that's why I sometimes say, how much longer do we have to suffer until we wake up? People we run away from our suffering. That's the whole problem in this world. The avoidance of pain and pursuit of pleasure. To run away from pain, like this, and then the addictions and buffering up, including spiritual bypassing. To get getting hooked on psychedelics and the peak experience medicine plans, or bliss practices to just create the chemicals, right? Just always more pleasure, but avoidance of pain. But the one defines the other. The more pleasure you pursue, the more pain will eventually, need to come up at some level. So I'm not talking about being sadomasochistically, to indulge, that's the dark side of it, so to speak. But that's what Gurdjieff talked about, the necessity for conscious suffering. And conscious suffering means to really, don't act out of just your impulses, question them, observe them, right? Resist it, so to speak. A lot of people suffer mechanically, in a sense, and they don't even know that they're suffering, right? And then
I have to say that this one's a really good one for resisting the urges for certain things. Fasting,
excellent.
Such a good one.
Absolutely, I agree. It's all psychologically, really, in the end, right? Yeah.
What are you doing besides saying, oh, I've been culturally programmed to eat all the fucking time. Right. So what am I going to do? Not eat for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good, I like to fast here and there.
Yeah.
So, but that's the whole thing with suffering. It's really interesting to see it more from that almost objective perspective, in sense, the role of suffering and what it entails. And
follow up to this. Okay. The analysis, both the intellectual analysis, but the embodiment analysis, the whole soulful analysis of the moment-to-moment being, and when I do suffer, what is going on? How can I help myself with this process? And then hopefully help others with this process so that they can tune in as well. Okay? I know we were touching on this earlier when we were sitting down, and I want to hear your thoughts on it as we come to a close. The notion of needing suffering, that we need it. I want to challenge that and see what your thoughts are about the challenge that if a child is born into a world let's say 1,000 years from now, hopefully we can get there in 1,000 years, or even a couple hundred years, hopefully we can get there, where there is no suffering on the planet anymore. Just imagine prosperity, it's looking great. When that child's born into the world, do they need to experience suffering in all these different states in order for them to be able to move forward? Or is it totally good and okay for them to be born into a world without suffering?
Well, first I want to put it called the need to suffer, because like this suffering aspect has been also, religion has used that to justify suffering. So I don't want to like put it in the context, you know what I mean? Not that, oh, we need suffering, like, okay, I need to, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just a byproduct of also just duality we live in.
Could we bypass, could we transcend the duality? Yes.
You know, so that's, you know, in your hypothetically utopian vision, which I'm not usually a big fan of because it's, you know, I don't really concern myself, but I wouldn't be able to answer it because it depends on the soul lesson of the child. And who am I to judge another person's soul lesson? I don't know. I'm trying to even understand my own.
Sure, I do see it as a very big potential. I really
absolutely. I feel like there's a utopian civilization, you know, at some point, but then many other changes, like the physiological changes. I feel like we're like in between right now. I feel also this full embodied galactic cosmic human being with full activated DNA, original genetic blueprint. We don't even have organs anymore. No need to eat physical food.
What other changes will occur by that
time?
Right,
and all of you know, so all of that we have, you know, even ability to inhabit this body or not. Like,
correct.
It's like that's a state of consciousness or being or existence you cannot even possibly. I mean, maybe imagine, but not, you know, understand.
100 years ago, they would be like, "What the fuck is going on today?" Well, in 100 years from now, we'll be like, "What the fuck was going on back then?" Hopefully, we'll have gotten to a point where some of these things.
Yeah, it goes beyond. I mean, like many things come into. I mean, especially in this day and age, I feel like it ties into when we talk about death, the incarnation process, and all of that. And do we actually always have to come back here as humans, right? In this body, and I feel many of us doing this type. Of transition have actually consciously chosen out of their free will to come back here, to be the renegades, to anchor that frequency, to help in the shift, you know, with our mission profile. We didn't come here for vacation, right? Which part of me just wants to F off to Costa Rica and live on the beach, but, you know, but then I'm like, spirit like, no, you got work, so okay. Yeah. I humbly align. Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's been going on in my head the last couple of years as well. It's been one of the strongest cognitive struggles that I've ever experienced, emotional struggles, is that, F off and go and relax. But why am I here?
Yeah.
I'm not here to relax on the beach. I'm here to make impact. I'm here to help, serve. Yeah.
That's a service, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, wow. Bernhard Guenther, holy cow. Scratching the surface of piercing the veil of reality, really, just scratching the surface. We scratched a bit. There's so much more to unpack. We will be very grateful to have you back from Los Angeles in the near future. Wow, my mind is expanded to beautiful places. My body is, my feelings are, my spirit is. It feels great.
There's so much we didn't get to, but that's okay.
Yes, we did
an hour and a half, almost hour and a half, Yeah.
Well, thank you guys.
You be sure to plug us.
I'm about to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm about to. Holy cow, everyone! Ron peeks his head into the camera. Holy cow! What an amazing trip. That was so much fun. Covered so many different topics, and we hope that out of all these topics that we covered, that some of them resonate with you. So comment below with your thoughts. We want to feature you on our Instagram. We want to feature you on our Twitter, on our social media platforms. We want to get this content out to more people. Hit the subscribe button. Join our family. We're going to join Bernhard's family with Veil of Reality. We're going to explode this type of communication across the planet. Help join, watch Bernhard's films, read his essays, all on veilofreality.com. Links in the bio. Join him. Join their team. Join us on Patreon. We need your help in sustaining the studio and helping bring Bernhard up more and different guests. We'd love to continue expanding. Do join us on Patreon, please. Eddie Codell, our producer for today, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Eddie. You're the man.
Yes, Eddie. It's eddie.com, eddie.com. Go visit him as well. Again, huge thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Bernhard, thank you so much for joining us up here in San Francisco. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
My brother.
All right,
Thank
much
you.
love, everyone.
Peace out.
Peace.